All right, so today we are in Daniel, but we're going to start with our key verses. Isaiah 25:8. He will swallow up death in victory, and the Lord God will wipe away tears from off all faces, and the rebuke of his people shall he take away from off all the earth, for the Lord hath spoken it. 1 Corinthians 15:54. So when this corruptible shall have put on incorruption, and this mortal shall have put on immortality, then shall be brought to pass the saying that is written, death is swallowed up in victory. And 1 John 5:4. For whatsoever is born of God overcometh the world. And this is the victory that overcometh the world, even our faith. All right, I'm going to read you two verses before we go to Daniel 3. Daniel 1:6. Now among these were the children of Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Those are those guys' real names from birth. Unto whom the prince of the eunuchs gave names, for he gave unto Daniel the name of Belteshazzar, and to Hananiah of Shadrach, and to Mishael of Meshach, and to Azariah of Abednego. So that's how they became Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The eunuch who had the care of them after captivity, he gave those names to them. Those are their Babylonian names. In Daniel 2:48. Then the king made Daniel a great man, and gave him many great gifts, and made him ruler over the whole province of Babylon, and chief of the governors over all the wise men of Babylon. Then Daniel requested of the king, and he set Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego over the affairs of the province of Babylon. But Daniel sat in the gate of the king. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are now in the upper levels of government in the province of Babylon, which is the capital city of everything there. So, just so you have that picture in your mind. Chapter 3. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces, to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then an herald cried aloud, To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king hath set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There were some flaws in this king. Not the least was a major God complex. I mean, this boy had unprecedented power. He literally ruled the entirety of the known world at this time. Israel is just small chump change compared to all the nations he had taken into his subjection and killed off whoever he wanted and took captive all the best of various nations. And that's why this guy who's calling out, the herald, is saying people from every nation and every tongue. There are people from all over the place who Nebuchadnezzar has taken into his kingdom and given positions to, and he rules everything. And he expects to be obeyed, and he has the power to carry it out. You're going to do what I say, or you will die. Verse 7. Therefore, at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshipped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Wherefore at that time certain Chaldeans came near and accused the Jews. They spake and said to the king Nebuchadnezzar, O king, live forever. Thou, O king, hast made a decree that every man shall hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, shall fall down and worship the golden image, and whoso falleth not down and worship, that he should be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. There are certain Jews whom thou hast set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, have not regarded thee. They serve not thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. There were men who despised Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were furious about the positions of authority that they held. They were jealous. And this is their golden opportunity to see these foreigners eliminated. They were more than happy to tell Nebuchadnezzar what these Jews had done. Let these boys burn. They just hated their gods. Verse 13. Then Nebuchadnezzar, in his rage and fury, commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Then they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spake and said unto them, Is it true, O Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? Do not ye serve my gods, nor worship the golden image which I have set up? Oh, note, the king knows these men by name. Do you see that? After all, they're right in his province, and they're very high up in government. Oh, he knows who these guys are. He has not forgotten who they were, and I guarantee he knows their friend Daniel. Now, I always have had this question in my mind, where was Daniel on this day? Because it's obvious he isn't here. But the king knows them. And he asked them a very legitimate question. Look, you've been in my kingdom possibly really and truly a couple of decades now. I've been training you. I've been taking care of you. I've elevated you to a great position and given you honor. You're not going to worship my gods? You're not going to obey me and bow down here? Boys, what's the problem? Really, he finds it very reasonable that they should follow his rules, serve his gods, and bow to his idol. He just thinks this is a reasonable thing. Verse 15. Now, if ye be ready, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the image which I've made, well. But if ye worship not, ye shall be cast the same hour into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is that God that shall deliver you out of my hands? Boys, you better think. Because you're either going to fall down and worship this idol, or you're going to burn. I'm not kidding you. And no God is going to be strong enough to get you out of this. This is really a very serious threat. And this man has the power to carry it out. This is not an idle threat. Verse 16. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we are not careful to answer thee in this matter. If it be so, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of thine hand, O king. Please notice there is absolutely no doubt in these men's minds that God is fully capable of saving them. They believe this completely. Verse 18, but if not, if God doesn't choose that, be it known unto thee, O king, that we will not serve thy gods, nor worship the golden image which thou hast set up. Whether God saves us or not, we're not bowing down. Our God can save us. But saving us or not saving us, that is entirely up to him. Wow. They did not presume upon the grace or the mercy or the action of God. They left the action that he would choose up to God. They made their choice based on their belief in a strong God, but they didn't tell God what to do. They didn't even presume what he would do. They trusted God about what he was going to do, and they were determined to do what was right, no matter what God did or did not do. Verse 19. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated. So here you have this furnace, and I imagine it's pretty big because it's going to hold a lot of people. I'm surprised that he did the furnace. I think he meant it as a threat. I don't know that he ever meant that he was going to have to carry it out. But they put so much into that furnace to heat it up, and I'm thinking maybe it wasn't just wood, because wood can only burn so hot. And they had made that thing burning hot. I am positive that the metal they used to construct it, or maybe they used clay, it was glowing hot by the time they were done. Verse 20, and he commanded the most mighty men that were in his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and to cast them into the burning fiery furnace. Then these men were bound in their coats, their hosen, their hats, and their other garments, and were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceeding hot, the flames of the fire slew those men that took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. The king sent his strongest men to carry these three to the furnace. You know, he literally risked the lives of some of his best men because he was so angry. His fury really took away some of his reason. And so, fully clothed and tightly bound, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego went into the flames. These same flames from the outside of the furnace literally devoured the men who threw them in. This is a ferocious fire. Verse 23. And these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down bound into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king was astonished, and rose up in haste and spake and said to his counselors, Did not we cast three men bound into the midst of the fire? They answered and said unto the king, True, O king. He answered and said, Lo, I see four men loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they have no hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God. At first, the men fell down in the midst of the fire. They were bound. They fell. And the very next thing, the king sees them walking around in the midst of the fire, and a fourth man with them, one who looked to the king like the Son of God. Yet the men were unhurt. He could see that they were not harmed by the flames. Verse 26. Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spake and said, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, ye servants of the Most High God, come forth and come hither. Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came forth of the midst of the fire. And the princes, governors, and captains, and the king's counselors, being gathered together, saw these men, upon whose bodies the fire had no power, nor was an hair of their heads singed, neither were their coats changed, nor the smell of fire had passed on them. When the king called them out, they came out. The king and everyone who was there with him bear witness to the fact that these servants of the Most High God were unscathed. In fact, they were untouched in any way by having been in the fire. Though they had been in that fire, they had not been affected by it. They didn't even smell like smoke. Verse 28. Then Nebuchadnezzar spake and said, Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who hath sent his angel and delivered his servants that trusted in him, and have changed the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they might not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Even a foreign king with real issues, I mean serious sin issues, could recognize devotion and faithfulness to a powerful and a holy God like Jehovah. He could recognize it in their behavior and in their commitment, and he respected their commitment to refuse to yield their bodies, because it would be your body that would be bowing to what was evil in God's sight. He really respected that. He recognized their faith, and he recognized their trust, and he recognized their complete confidence in God and in his ability to save. A very small side note. He said it looked like the Son of God. Now he calls it an angel. Sometimes when you read in the Word of God, especially in the Old Testament, you will hear the angel of the Lord. And oftentimes that actually is Jesus. Pay attention to what's going on around it and what happens. And that's another terminology that's used for him. And so sometimes look for that language and you'll see, oh, that was actually Jesus in a theophany, God appearing in human form. Just so you know that. So now he's calling it an angel before he said that it was the Son of God. All right, verse 29. Therefore I make a decree that every people, nation, and language, and remember, this guy's the king of the world, which speak anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made a dunghill, because there is no other God that can deliver after this sort. Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar made an unprecedented command this day. Anyone who insults the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is going to get cut into little pieces. Their house is going to be utterly destroyed and made a dunghill. Okay, that's really big stuff coming from this guy. There is no God like Jehovah, and he acknowledged it. No one can save like this God. You better not say one bad word against this God, because if you do, you're going to answer to me. Okay, there is so much in here. So let's try to see what we can learn about victory in our own lives. Okay, from Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's really almost unreasonable confidence in a mighty God. Okay. Sometimes we're really faced with a tough decision. Okay. I realize this is sort of minor in comparison, but it doesn't matter. It is a genuine tough thing for us. Okay. Sometimes your boss might say to you, you just kind of need to fudge these numbers a little bit for me, you know, so it looks a little better at the end of quarter report, and just, you know, tweak it a little bit so it looks better. In other words, I need you to lie for me. So is it easier just to do what he says and do a little imaginative number rearrangement? Or is it smarter to obey God, and if you get fired or you get demoted or whatever happens to you, to say, okay, but I need to do what is right? There have been times in my life when I've really struggled with something, and I actually literally remember Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These guys were fighting for their very lives. This wasn't some small thing. And what you have to remember is there are tens of thousands of people gathered on this plain. That's why they did it in the plain of Dura. They needed a lot of room. And this king is high up on a pedestal, and though we don't know it, it's very likely that the image was of Nebuchadnezzar himself, because that's the way those guys were. They really did have pretty big God complexes. And that's why he took it so personally, that they wouldn't bow down. And they had to declare this faith not just in front of the king, but in front of every single person that was present there. And then, you want to talk about, it's one thing to get yelled at by your boss in his office, but this was going to happen in front of all of these people. Everyone was going to know that these guys died in the flames because they were so stupid, they just wouldn't do this simple little thing the king asked them to do. Sometimes, when we are faced with a very difficult decision, or one that seems almost impossible for us, because after all, our kids need to eat, and we really need this job, and it's not so easy to get another one in, and yet we need to choose what is right. Not look at the consequences, but look at what is right. That's what they did. Okay. You know when you have enemies who really hate your guts? You ever had someone who just like hated your guts? Whether they had a good reason or not, it doesn't change the force of their animosity towards you. And I mean, all of us really desperately want to be liked and have people care about us. It's not ever comfortable to have someone just despise us, much less when they talk badly to us and, you know, slap us around if they have the power to do that. There's just nothing good about this. And these guys, they didn't just hate their guts. They were looking for a way to really and truly get rid of them forever. They wanted to harm them. They wanted to accuse them. They were just looking to make their life pure and utter, we know what, torment on the earth. They really did. Listen carefully. Don't waste time defending yourself. Do you notice Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? They didn't have a word to say about any of this stuff. Well, that wasn't really fair. Why are these guys even running their mouths? No, they didn't even defend themselves. Don't attack. You know, our response when someone attacks us is to back, jump back. I can nail you better than you ever got me. We'll go back to junior high. You're going to insult me, I'm going to insult you better. And blah, blah, blah. You know how that goes. And ultimately, sometimes it even ends up in a fist fight. People are human, and that's the way we act. Don't attack those people. Don't even answer them. Don't defend yourself to them. Focus on God.
Soft answer.
Yes. But no answer. Maybe. Those people are, I don't want to say irrelevant because that's not really true. If anything, we need to love them and pray for them. But we don't need to use any of our energy on their nonsense. We need to stay focused on God, using our energy for the thing that we were put in position for. They're in a position of leadership. They don't need to be wasting time on all these people who are petty and hate them. They need to be using their time wisely to serve the king, to serve the people, and to honor God. That's what they did. The one that is really tough, I think, for most of us is leave the results to God. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, our God can save us. There isn't a single doubt in our minds. We know, we are confident that our God is able to save us. But whether he saves us or not, it isn't going to change what we're going to do. Wow. Okay. You know, I really came to this place in my own life. And it is not an easy place to come to. When I said, God, if you don't give me back my mind and I can serve you better like this, okay, then just leave me like this. When I was so badly brain damaged, that was my answer. And it took a very long time to come to that. And somehow or another, we need to leave the results, the decision, the choice of what's coming to God. It doesn't mean we can't ask him, God, I'd really like you to heal me. God, I'd really like you to heal my loved one. I'd really like you to do something in this financial situation. I'd really like you to take care of this mess in my family where nobody can seem to get along and it's just chaos all the time. I'd like you to do something. But whether you do it or not, I'm still going to keep doing the very exact same thing. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to follow you. My faith is not going to waver. I'm not going to say, well, I asked God and he didn't do anything for me. I'm out of here. No. I am going to be steadfast and faithful, and the actions that you take or don't take are entirely up to you. Now that is faith. To let God make the decision about what is best for me. Okay. You know what? Sometimes in life, we can get ourselves in some places, okay? And we are tied up. We cannot seem to get out. But even if we are bound and helpless and the situation looks impossible, do not give up hope. Keep God's power in mind. So I've shared this before with some people, maybe even a few people in this room. A person who's a drug addict or an alcoholic or a sexual addict or addicted to pornography or bound in some kind of wretched sin, gambling, they just can't get out of this mess. Okay? Oh, do not give up hope for them. Don't say, well, that's what you're going to do. Fine. And just, write them off. No, do not give up hope. Keep God's power in mind. Now listen carefully. There may be some fire coming. And I've never met a soul, really, that was sane, that would walk into fire on purpose. It's not something any of us would be signing up for, right? Because it hurts like crazy to get burnt. But still, don't avoid the fire. If it's the fire or being bound, consider the fire. And we'll get there in a minute. You need to wait for God to show up and set you free. It was in the fire that they were set free. They fell down bound into the fire. And it was in the fire that they were released. Okay. Remember, God is in the fire. Don't try to get out. Just look for his face in the furnace. Okay. I love this. He set them free in the fire, but he didn't get them out of it. He just stayed there with them in it. You know, he might give us liberty in the trial, but not release us from the trial itself. Sometimes we're so busy trying to get out of the trial, out of the fire, that we're missing what's supposed to be happening in the trial, in the fire. Because in the fire is where we're going to get free. In the fire is where the filth and the yucky parts of our life are going to get burned away. Okay? I've shared this with you before. Fire has two purposes. It cleanses. All right? If you had surgery and they didn't have cautery, you would die. I mean this as a nurse. I'm telling you the honest to goodness truth, okay? They cauterize those little vessels so you don't bleed to death. They cauterize that dead skin that's so unhealthy for you that if they put the edges of, it's called necrotic skin, of dead skin together, they can't ever heal. They have to get to the healthy skin and put the healthy parts together in order for you to heal correctly. There has to be fire to heal, okay? And fire burns away what is dirty and unnecessary and impure. In the old days with the plague, with bubonic plague, cholera, typhoid even to this day, they have to burn everything. And it destroys, but it destroys what is bad. It destroys what's going to harm you. If God has you in the fire, probably He's destroying something harmful in your life. Don't fight that. Ask Him for strength to stand in the flames.
Fire hurts.
It does hurt. Nobody ever said this wasn't painful. Nobody ever said that. Now look, even though they were in the fire, when they walked out, that fire had not really done them any harm. And I think that that's what we have to remember. When we're in the fire and things are getting burned away, it might be painful to let go of some of what we've had such a hard hold on that wasn't really very good for us. You know, that scene of our filthy rags and how tightly we hold them, we cling to them. Oh, but I'm cold and I need this. It's the only covering I have. No, it is not. You have the robes of God's righteousness if you would just get rid of, discard, be willing to burn up your filthy rags. That's not all you've got. But it's what we think is important and we hang on so tightly. Oh my gracious, let go. And if He burns it, it isn't that great of a loss anyway. And when you walk out of that fire, you're not going to smell like smoke. But you're also not going to come out the same way that you went in. That's a good thing, okay? You know, we walk in a really filthy world. I mean, it is polluted. Wow. It dawned on me the other day, even the previews. I go to see a decent movie, and the previews are polluting my mind. Sometimes I don't even want to go see the previews anymore because, like, wait a minute, I did not pay for this. Yeah, it's just, and to them, it's not that big of a deal. You're at a G movie that doesn't have any trash in it whatsoever, but they're showing you this yuck on the previews. Wait a minute. And honestly, I don't know that there is a good show on TV, but if there were, and if you're watching a decent show on television, the commercials are enough to singe your ears and certainly pollute your spirit. Just, it's horrible. As I tell my grandkids, what you call a commercial, we used to call pornography. That's not even a joke. It's seriously true. Yeah, the world is filthy, but they don't know that they are. But we certainly do. Okay? And we're supposed to walk in this world. Jesus was a friend of sinners. He went to parties. He hung out. We know. They called him a glutton and a wine bibber. They told him he was a drunk. He was always with those sinners, boy. But he wasn't polluted by it. We're supposed to be going out into the world and be light and salt and share the gospel, but not come away smelling like they do. When we get back home, we should be the same as we were when we went out. Unscathed, untouched. In James, it tells us that we should be unspotted by the world, that our walk and our hearts are supposed to be holy, just as He is holy. You know, this remains this is vital that we have this close proximity to God. It remains a priority to be with God, to be untouched or unscathed by the world. In other words, we don't go out there on our own and think it's not going to affect us or influence. We have to go out there with God in order that we are the influence, not them influencing us. But they walked out. They didn't smell like the furnace. We shouldn't smell like the world when we get back home. We should be rubbing off on them. And as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego yielded their bodies to God, a lot of people saw this. People around us, they see us. They really do see us. They know for sure if our lives are yielded to God or we're just talking about it. They know it. I don't care what a great game you talk. They actually know. And do you know that that devotion will make an impact on someone else? It might make them hate us. I just want you to know that. That might be one of the responses. Or it might really impress them, but not change them. Or it might actually change the minds or even the heart of someone else as we live out our faith, as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego lived out their faith in front of Nebuchadnezzar and all of these persons. Because at the end of all of this, Nebuchadnezzar said, instead of, you better bow down to this idol or I'm going to kill you, he said, you better not insult Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego's God, or you're going to pay with your life. That's a very significant change in Nebuchadnezzar's mindset because of their faith and because of their actions. So don't ever doubt that your life isn't able to make an impact on someone else, or that your faith walk isn't visible to someone else and affecting them and changing their heart or changing their mind. Do you know that our victory can cause even the unrighteous to admit and acknowledge that God is God alone? That one is amazing to me. People who say, well, there's not really a God. In our world today, I think sometimes as Christians, because of all of this multiplicity of religions and everything's really okay, no matter what you believe, you're going to be just fine, and it's not going to really matter, and it's all right. And the illustration I use about falling into the pit, and the guy in the pit doesn't set the terms. The rescuer does. And we can say all day it doesn't really matter what you believe, or as long as you believe something, you'll be all right. That's not ours to determine. God sets the terms. He's the one who said that there is no other name given among men whereby you must be saved. And Jesus said there is one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. That's it. I'm sorry that drives people crazy. I'm sorry people don't want to accept it. I'm sorry it makes people angry. But what I'm sorry is for that their souls may be lost to hell because they don't want to acknowledge that God is God alone. And God is the one who sets the terms. So these guys' actions was so convincing that Nebuchadnezzar acknowledged God is God alone. I don't know if we will ever be in a position to have that much of an impact in someone else's life. But if we do, it may require the fire. I know we want to have that kind of an impact, but we don't want to go in the fire. The problem is you don't get to have one without the other. So what are you willing to do to have that kind of an impact on another person's life? That's really the important question to me today. What am I willing to do to have that much of an impact on someone else? And the last one I just looked at it again this morning and it struck me. Those guys already were in a position of pretty high authority, of great responsibility. And that's why some of the Babylonians themselves were ticked off that these jerk Jews come in from a foreign country with some really weird beliefs and they're already ruling. Yeah, okay, let's try to get these boys out of here. And then Nebuchadnezzar promotes them. Wow, Let's talk about not exactly what those boys who were looking for some kind of revenge got. In fact, not only were they here before, now they're even higher than they were. Sometimes we go to great lengths to try to get ourselves promoted. In what area of life? All kinds of them. That someone would think well of us, that someone would be impressed by us, that we would even be elevated in someone's estimation. That kind of promotion sometimes we look for. And of course at work we'll look for a promotion, and we want to be ahead of the pack. Of course, that's what we want to be. We're humans. Sometimes promotion comes in the most unexpected ways. They had to go through the fight of their life to find promotion. We look for victory sometimes, I think, in obvious ways, and we miss that in the fire, in the trial, in the difficulty, in the confrontation of our faith, that sometimes that's where the promotion is going to come from. That God is going to raise us up and elevate us and increase people's estimation of who we are because of our faithfulness in the fire, because of our determination when someone's confronting us and they're waiting for us to back down, and we're just not going to back down. They never got in Nebuchadnezzar's face like, I don't know who you think you are, bud, putting up this big fancy idol out in the middle of the desert. Like, I don't have to bow down to this jerk. What are you thinking? There was no confrontation or insult or assault against Nebuchadnezzar himself, ever. It stayed about God for them. Do we actually do that? Don't we easily get pulled into the kind of argument with people and make it personal and start to attack back instead of making sure it's about God, which is actually who it is about? These guys, though they were in a foreign land, in a place where there was no temple for them to go worship, no priest for them to go sacrifice with, there was just nothing that was normal or familiar that allowed them to practice their faith walk with God. And yet their faith was unshaken. We get to come to church every day if we want. We have a Bible we can read all the time if we want. We have Christian radio. We have so much. What in the world is our excuse? And the answer is, we don't have one. Really, we are without excuse. That's the truth of the matter. We have to start acknowledging the problem is with us. I don't have that strong of faith. I don't have that unshakable confidence in God that no matter what He's going to do is okay with me. I want to fight the furnace. I don't really want to go there, so I try to avoid it. Sometimes I make very poor decisions to try to avoid it. Sometimes I even make decisions that don't honor God to avoid it. I need to have a strong devotion and commitment to God because I can, and because He's worthy of that kind of commitment, and He's deserving of that kind of praise. He's worth that kind of level of my walk day by day by day. That's why I need to do it. And if He chooses to promote me, well. And if He chooses to let me be consumed by the flames, that is also well with me. I need to really get to that place where when God is going to be the victor and God is going to be the one who's going to receive the glory, that I'm willing to do whatever is necessary for that to happen and leave the results to God. And because Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego really were willing to do that, they had a victory beyond really and truly much of what Scripture contains. I just think these three guys, though they're minimally mentioned, their life was amazing in the impact that it had because of their willingness to stand up for God. And they won an amazing victory because of their complete devotion to God and their dependence on what He chose for them. He'd already chosen to bring them to a foreign land, but lifted them up. He had already chosen to put them under the dictates of a foreign king and gave them respect. He had already chosen to let them be away from their family and away from everything that was familiar, and yet protected and provided for them. He was a God they could depend upon. He was a God that they could call out to. And He has already given us everything we need. He has already given us more than we could ever ask or want. He is a God upon whom we can depend. He is a God upon whom we can call. And He is a God in whom we can trust. God, I pray that you would help us to have faith, and that you would help that faith to grow and develop and deepen. And I pray that you would help us to have strong confidence in you. And I do ask you, God, that you would make us courageous, that in the trials and the fires of life, that instead of running and wiggling like a worm on a hook, that we would hold still, stand in the fire, and look for your face there with us. God, I pray that you would give each one of us hearts that are devoted and committed and excited to walk with you and to serve you. In Jesus' name, amen.
That was a good lesson, Brad.
Mm.